Good morning.
Good morning.
Again, this is the San Francisco Airport Roundtable Technical Working Group. We will begin in just a few minutes.
So Linda, you let me know when you're ready to go.
I think Angela is promoting a few people to panelists, so just give it another maybe 1 minute.
Sounds good. I got my script ready to go.
I didn't know promoting to panelist was an option.
That's to distinguish between members and presenters as panelists and the members of the public.
I think it's marvelous. At our council meeting last night, I had my first private message chats that I have to declare. So we shut chat down.
I think we're ready, Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I call to order the July 30th, says here, SFO Airport Roundtable Community Roundtable Technical Working Group Ad Hoc Subcommittee meeting at 11:33. We're meeting via Zoom teleconference pursuant to the shelter-in-place order issued by the San Mateo County Health Officer, the Governor's Office, and the CDC social distancing guidelines, which discourage large public gatherings. Joining us today to help staff this meeting are Angela Montes, Roundtable Administrative Assistant, Linda Wolin, Senior Legislative Aide to Supervisor Dave Pine, and Acting Roundtable Coordinator Justin Cook, Technical Consultant from HMMH, and Kathleen Wentworth, Senior Advisor to Congresswoman Jackie Spear. We also have Bert Gunnock from the and other staff from the Airport Noise Abatement Office. Please note that we'll be recording this meeting and the recordings will be available on the Roundtable website in a few days. At this point, staff will explain how the public can participate in today's meeting. Linda?
Sorry, just
That mute button, that mute button.
it's my script. Angela, can you take this part?
Yes, thank you, Chair Ortiz. For those attending the meeting on the Zoom video conference, we will use the raised hand feature in order to organize any public comments during the general public comment period and for each item on the agenda. We will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raised hand feature to speak on that agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. When you hear your name called, we will prompt you to unmute your account and inform you that you may begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes. Please note the members of the public must wait for a prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raised hand function. Written comments that were submitted in advance will be read by myself during the discussion during the appropriate agenda item. Thank you.
And I'm having a little trouble opening my agenda item, so I'm having a real trouble opening the agenda period. So I don't know, Angela, if you have it, what is the first item on the agenda?
The first item would be just to take public comment on items not on the agenda. So the only agenda item is the FAA presentation on night hush. So if there are members of the public who wish to comment on something other than that, this would be the time to use the raise hand feature.
Very good. And other than that, we're just presenting the FAA and for them to make their presentation. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so with that, then we'll open it for public comment. Is there any public comment, Angela?
Thank you, Chair. We did not receive any written comments, and at the moment, we do not have any hands raised for items not on the agenda.
There were having no hands raised. We'll wait just a few minutes to see if anybody wants to make a comment.
And in the meantime, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to acknowledge the members of the roundtable who are present at this meeting. So that would be yourself, Chairman Ortiz, also Vice Chair Ann Wangert from Portola Valley, and Vice Mayor Ann Schneider from Millbrae. If there are any other members of the roundtable who I've not identified, I apologize, and we'll try to note you momentarily.
Very good. I got my agenda open now, so I'm happy. So having no comment, then we will move right along to a presentation from the Federal Aviation Administration on the night hush procedures. So Sky, I'm not sure who's presenting, but if you would like to introduce your group, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Ortiz, and roundtable members, technical working group members. Thank you for the opportunity to brief this morning on the night hush departure procedure. Today, as the chairman said, I'll give introductions. Today we have with us Ms. Fabiola Garcia, who's the Senior Advisor to the Regional Administrator for the Western Pacific region. We also have Adam Vetter, who's a Senior Technical Advisor, as well as Bonnie Malgarini, who's an analyst, as well as a Community Engagement Specialist. So Bonnie will be driving the brief a little bit later. I just, again, want to say thank you for this opportunity, and this was discussed at the last San Francisco Roundtable, June 3rd, as well as in a follow-up letter from the Roundtable, June 15th. So we look forward to sharing our information with you. And on that note, I'll just briefly kick it over to Ms. Garcia.
Sorry, can I interrupt 1 second? This is Linda Wolin again. Just for members of the public and members of the roundtable who are participating, the letter from Chairman Ortiz to the FAA that Sky just referenced is included as an attachment to the agenda, available on the website for anyone that might want to consult with it during the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sky. Good morning, everyone. I guess it's still morning. It's good to see all of the familiar faces. First of all, let me take this opportunity to wish everyone good health during this time. It's good that we have at least this opportunity to interact through video. On behalf of Raquel Gervin, the Regional Administrator, I want to extend her greetings and well wishes for a successful meeting. You'll be hearing from our team, and I will turn it over. I'm not sure if I should just turn it over to Bonnie or Adam.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I just wanted to kind of introduce Bonnie. She is one of the newer analysts, community engagement specialists for our team. I'm taking a new role in the operations support group in the FAA. But specifically, I have been involved in this project for a very long time, and so I'd like to see this through through whatever end we decide to get it through. But shifting the actual tactical work will be Bonnie, and she's very capable and very knowledgeable about air traffic, aviation in this project overall. So I just wanted to just pass that along. So Bonnie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Adam. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So this presentation is to provide information requested by the Roundtable. As you know, the Roundtable requested Google Earth files of track data, departure arrival routes, special use airspace, and where ATC may vector aircraft. And I do have the Google Earth files that were emailed to the Roundtable available if you'd like to see them after the presentation. So this presentation has information on the night hush departure procedure, the environmental review, special use airspace, and conclusions. In this graphic, we've displayed the night hush and stick departures as requested. We've provided a summary of the requests from both the San Francisco Roundtable and the Select Committee. And they're very similar in their request up to the ocean. Once they cross the ocean, the Select Committee's recommendation is ended, and then the Roundtable's recommendation continues to GOBS and a transition to the south. The night hush procedure as published already has a transition to the west past the Golden Gate Bridge. We are proposing to use this transition for current southbound stick and candle departures with the exception of aircraft requiring runway 28. And since it is an existing published procedure and no amendment is necessary, the implementation time for this is greatly reduced. Once the aircraft are past the Golden Gate Bridge up here at the top and over the ocean, the air traffic controllers will allow aircraft to turn and rejoin their flight route. The question was asked if there are any fixes or points on any of the stick transition paths that will not be used for aircraft to be vectored to. And the port, U-tube, and foil will probably not be used. We looked at 30 random days worth of data and found that the majority of the aircraft go either to KX, down to the southeast, or Intel. This graphic combines from where aircraft will probably start their turn and may fly when rejoining their route. So the aircraft won't be spread out over the entire magenta area, but will be proceeding towards the fixes shown in the previous slide. We do not have the data on the altitudes the aircraft will be at when over the Golden Gate Bridge or when they cross back over land. We do estimate that when they cross the Golden Gate Bridge, they'll be between 10 and 15,000. The minimum en route altitude on this transition is 7,100. So we know that they will be above that altitude. So as you know, through analysis and discussion with NCT, we found that combining the southern departures from San Francisco and Oakland into one stream was possible, but it might shift noise and would require extra flying miles. Also, the maximum number of aircraft that could be combined into one stream is 30, and that number restricts the usable hours to 1 to 5 a.m. The environmental review is being conducted to include noise screening, fuel burn, CO2 emissions, and Section 106 consultation. And the review is still being conducted, so we don't have the information to share yet. The special use airspace is not only west of the proposed routes, but are also usually not active during the hours of 1 to 5 a.m. The hours are typically 6:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. unless activated by NOTAM. Also, the special use airspace off the coast only affects aircraft on the offshore and young transition on the Candle and Westla departures. Conclusions on the night hush transition to GOBS. It is dependent upon consistent operational levels from San Francisco and Oakland, which means if there are additional flights scheduled that bring the number above 30, we would not be able to use this procedure. There are external efforts being to sync the operations between San Francisco and Oakland so that all the flights don't want to depart, let's say, in the first 15 minutes and cause delays. So from 1 to 5 a.m., we could continue to operate the San Francisco-Oakland departures into a single stream, but that is absent unforeseen weather conditions or delays. So the aircraft volume and the combining of the two departure streams are the major factors that determine the usable hours. If a decision is made to go forward with this proposal, implementation time would be subject to LOA revision and training timelines. And the revisions can be accomplished very quickly. The shortest I've ever seen is in a day and then maybe up to a couple of weeks, but then there'd be 30 days, up to 30 days of training time. And it would likely be more than 2 years to implement a new procedure. So do you have any questions? Mr. Ortiz is muted.
I'm sorry, I'm talking, I had a great question and I was muted the whole time, so sorry about that. So but here's a couple of questions just to clarify, to try to translate this a little bit into English. We are talking about a small number of flights that are currently taking off northbound on 1R or 1L and making a quick left turn flying over San Francisco and then flying south over the peninsula. And now they will be going north tonight, making a left turn, going all the way to Gobbs. Is that correct?
We don't know that they will go all the way to Gobbs. In discussions with NCT, once they are over the ocean, since there is no other restriction, the air traffic controllers will probably turn the aircraft to rejoin their route of flight.
Excellent. So, okay, and that makes sense. But so let's talk about the current flight path. If you have that arrow that you were just doing to show us what that's the current flight path. So at the peak of that curve right there, roughly what altitude are we talking about right there?
Adam, do you have that information?
So you're talking about the curve that's just almost adjacent to Mid-Bay, right over to the west?
Where the arrow is right there. Yep.
Right, that is the stick. And I believe that's about 1,000, if not 500 feet above the water. Those aircraft ship over to where Mid-Bay is, and they fly to Mid-Bay up to night and then over to Gobbs.
So when they're flying into San Francisco right there they're at an altitude of somewhere between 500 to 1,000 feet above sea level?
I will have to look at the procedure, but like I said, those aircraft will no longer fly over that area during this time period.
No, I get it. I'm just comparing. What I'm trying to do is compare one procedure to what's being proposed. So I'm just trying to understand. So if these aircraft now are going to night, could you give me an idea of what the altitude would be once they reach night?
So at night, before they make this turn on, they need to be at 7,100. So that's why we're estimating that they'll be between 10 and 15,000 over the Golden Gate Bridge.
Okay, perfect. That's kind of what I wanted to clarify. Thank you very much. And then one other question, and I don't know who might have this. I had different numbers that I wrote down, so I wanted to clarify. Roughly how many flights are we talking about on a daily basis?
Are you talking between 1 to 5 a.m.?
Correct.
So Adam, I'm not sure the number. Would be less than 150 because that would be 30 per hour, but I believe closer to 20 per hour. Is that right, Adam?
Yeah, it is far less. It's in below 50. And I can, looking up the exact numbers of what we were looking at previously to this briefing itself. We looked at, actually monthly and weekly totals, if not daily totals of numbers of aircraft that would fly on these procedure or on this procedure. Okay. Have that by the end of this meeting.
Very good. Thank you very much. And again, all I'm trying to do is try to kind of illustrate to the public what this change means to those neighborhoods in San Francisco in the middle of the night, which I think could be pretty substantial. I mean, again, they're flying at such a low altitude that if they're flying anywhere in between 1 and 5 a.m., that's going to be a big change for them. But we want to kind of get a sense of how many flights that is to kind of quantify that change, that impact. So with that, I'm going to open it to the other members of the roundtable, or actually, let me go with Justin. Are you on? Justin from HMMA?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here, Mr.
I
Chair.
know that we had discussed some questions. Would you mind running those through? And then Kathleen,
Sure,
would you
not a
mind
problem.
going after him? Good. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I have three, areas to touch on. I wanted to ask in regards to implementation time and sort of related to the environmental review, when do you anticipate that to be complete, if you have any sense of that? And specifically what I'm getting at is in regards to also the public comments that should be submitted to the roundtable, so that there's timing, of course, for that to occur.
So in terms of the environmental review, we are doing, like I said, we are doing an environmental review on this procedure. It is slightly different in that it is an existing procedure that we are increasing the utilization specifically on the transition between night and Gobbs. So that does change really the level of analysis, and we're doing, honestly, for the scope of the change, we're doing more than we have before. in terms of the comments and the next steps, our intention is to work with the roundtable and discuss, once we have those results from the analyses, to discuss how best to relay those to the public, and to answer your question, how best to help guide the roundtable, not guide the roundtable, how work with the roundtable to receive the comments based on the information we provide from the analyses. So I don't want to say that we have a cut and dry timeline, but we want to work with the roundtable to discuss our messaging strategy and how we're going to relay the results.
Okay, great.
Sorry to interrupt. This is Linda. Is that
Yeah.
just because there isn't really an established infrastructure to do that because because it's an existing procedure? So you'd like us to establish a kind of a procedure to do that? Maybe I shouldn't use the word procedure. Method for presenting the results of your environmental review and having the public be able to submit comments on that?
So in terms of the public comment, I don't know if that was, I'm sorry, I apologize. I didn't know if that was directed at Justin or myself. But in terms of the public comment, this was a community-based request originally from the select committee. And then once that ceased or ended, we worked with the roundtable specifically on this request. So we would like to have and keep the San Francisco Roundtable specifically be the change proponent for the request of this procedure. And specifically working just like we're doing today, we're working through the times that we can do it, the impacts that it'll have, not just to air traffic, but the communities as well, because the roundtable knows the communities better than we do. Working collaboratively on developing that plan. And since it is a community-based request, really the San Francisco Roundtable is the entity to receive those. In terms of the environmental review, I understand in certain levels of environmental review, there are public comment periods. As of right now, this does not warrant that level of environmental analyses, but that's not to say that we won't work with the roundtable for comments and help the roundtable, develop the community engagement strategy with that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
And Chairman Ortiz, I wanted to ask a question, if you don't mind. I hope I didn't interrupt the flow. We were talking about the stick departure procedure and the potential impacts to the communities. I wanted to make sure that based on this graphic is not showing the tracks or aircraft that would be added to overflights or overfly the peninsula additionally. These are just all the flights between 1 and 5 a.m. and those that are over the peninsula that are on the stick, specifically the ones that we were talking about, would actually shift over the water.
Here we go again. Thank you, Adam. I do appreciate that. My concern and my questions were regarding just the initial route, and we will talk about what happens after the fact a little later, and I think Kathleen may have some questions about that. But my concern was truly just in that initial departure. Okay, did we have any other?
I have a couple more. Yeah, a couple more, if you don't mind. In regards to the 30 flights per hour, I'm guessing that's what you've deemed as the basic cap, I guess, for what you're allowing between 1 and 5 a.m. Basically, you've determined that between 1 and 5 a.m. because it's less than 30 per hour, you're able to do that. Is that correct?
So I don't want to be, I kind of would hesitate using the word allow. The 30 per hour was based on the wording of the request and being able to accomplish the request while not causing aircraft or airlines to incur any ground-based delays. In terms of the congestion between the mid-bay and night waypoint, specifically that center line of the bay, that is the maximum number of aircraft per hour that air traffic control can accommodate.
Can handle.
And anything more than that basically has to stay on the ground. And so the 1 to 5 a.m. is a time period where we reasonably expect that we can accomplish this. And again, all of this is weather dependent, special events, anything like that can change things dynamically. But on a normal condition, without any undue delays from the midnight to 1 hour. Between 1 and 5, we reasonably expect that we can do this a high majority of the time. I hesitate saying 100% because, you know,
Yeah, sure.
everything's dynamic. But it also gives somewhat of a buffer from those delays, because anything between midnight and 1 is pushing up against that 30 per hour. And in some cases, in some months, we've seen that 30 occurs between 12 and 12:15. And so it's not just the 30 per hour, it's making sure that 30 occurs over the span of 60 minutes.
Gotcha. So is that to say, just to follow off with that, I thank you for that. Is that to say that you could possibly do it between 12 and 1 if traffic allows for that? I know I'm pushing you here on this one, but
Justin,
is that something that would, I know.
Great
But
question.
is that something you would
Great question.
consider based off of the traffic dynamically, of course? I know it's difficult to answer that.
It is difficult. And right now we're looking at 1 to 5 a.m. That is the proposal, that is the analysis that is the proposal that is under review in the environmental analyses that we're doing. Specifically to the point that it is not a brand new procedure. It is utilization of an existing procedure, and there causes a lot of issues if we kind of use it half the time that we cover in our analysis, and then, you know, the other half it's not used because of the traffic issues. And we also don't want to provide any false expectations to the community of saying, yeah, we can reasonably do it 12 to 1 a.m. And then for the first 3 months, we have delays from weather or anything like that, that pushes it on anyways.
Gotcha.
But this is the time that we're comfortable that we can do it.
And Justin, just to clarify, the question I was asking about the flight volumes earlier, what I just wanted to get to is how many flights are using the stick today between 1 to 5? That would, if this is all approved, would otherwise go tonight. So that's all I was asking, is the number of flights that are currently using stick between 1 to 5.
Okay. Thank you.
Justin, you have anything else?
I do, and I think it may lead into, we could tie it into Kathleen, but it was just my other area of questioning was in regards to what happens after GOP. And specifically, I understand, as you stated, that, the aircraft it's not a flyover, it's not necessarily going over gobs or reaching gobs, that they could transition to things south earlier on. And so I know what was stated was that port and foil probably would not be used. And I don't know if I understood that correctly, but the goal obviously has been to try to maintain aircraft over the ocean. And so I was just curious if you could clarify regarding port and foil in that relation to what happens after GOPS.
Pardon me for the interruption, but I wonder at this time, Adam or Bonnie, if you might have some of the other slides that you prepared that would be helpful to help answer that question.
Oh, some Google Earth stuff. Yeah.
Yes, I can bring up the Google Earth files.
So while Bonnie is doing that, I would like to explain the GOBS and then Libo. I'm trying to remember all those 6 fixes that Libo, KX, all of those 5 or 6 fixes all the way to Intel. When they make the turn to GOBS, trying to turn back to foil or port and then back over to Suzy or KX or Libo, in terms of procedures and air traffic control, we try not to do a left left or right left right turn where it goes back and forth, because I definitely don't want to sit through that in the back of an airplane. On that image, and I know we're going to look at the Google Earth files right now, but on that image that showed that gray or that purple area, anywhere in there, that's really the extreme area of where these aircraft will be, depending on where they turn prior to GOBS or even after GOBS. having that turn on, you know, going to those 5 waypoints is going to have some slop. That's the exact one right there. There is a potential that they can be cleared direct foil and then on their course. But in terms of what we're analyzing and working with the airliners and the stakeholders is connecting the waypoints or clearing them to waypoints where their route of flight begins on an en route segment. So for example, these 5 waypoints. So from Katina, Susie, KX, and then Entel, from those waypoints to another one down in the LA basin, down to the Southwest, Phoenix, Las Vegas, that area, we're trying to connect it back to their en route flight plan. And so that's why we're using those 4 waypoints there.
Okay. Kathleen, do you have anything that you would like to add? I'm good for now.
Okay, I do. Am I coming through? Yes?
You are. You.
Thanks.
Yep.
Adam, I do have a couple of questions, or perhaps Bonnie. Hello, Bonnie, welcome. If we look back up, and this is a great slide to have up with the magenta, the start of the turn short of Gobs into this magenta area is beautiful. Thank you. Can you let us know how many miles east of Gobs that looks like to you?
So like we were saying, this is the extreme. That's if they started. I believe it's about 5 miles, and Bonnie's going to measure it.
Perfect.
And I'm going to say wrong, 7.6. And as a pilot,
7.6. Okay.
Right, they're not going to make that right angle turn.
Is that nautical or statute?
Nautical miles.
Google Earth is nautical?
We're using nautical miles. I think you have.
That's okay. Great.
I think that's regular miles. You could probably switch it, Bonnie, to nautical. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
There it is. There it is. Yeah. There you go.
Okay. So we can make the conversion, but we got the concept. Great. I understand that's the worst case. Right. Now, and I assume that's some kind of a standard rate 3-degree turn. Is that?
Yes. Yeah.
Standard rate turn.
Yeah. Everything's standard. And this is I'll say also this is using the minimum climb gradient. So this is if the aircraft was at a much lower altitude as well.
Altitude or airspeed?
Altitude.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, as aircraft climb, obviously their turns are a little bit different. And so this is really showing the worst case scenario of the lowest altitude, the lowest path that they'd be over the ground.
And what airspeed is this predicated on, this turn?
I'm not sure what the airspeed is specifically.
Bonnie?
You know, it is a standard rate turn.
No airspeed, okay. And so this is the worst case. Is there any reason that they couldn't start their turn at Gobs instead of 6 miles, 7 miles east?
In terms of, there's a couple of reasons. One, if the warning areas are activated at night, which is honestly a rare occurrence.
And that's pretty far from Gobs, isn't it?
It is, but
so that shouldn't be a factor.
All over there, that is a factor depending on how far out they go, and I understand going over there.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Part is we're adding a single stream of aircraft as well, and like I said, depending on at what point in the hour these 20 or 15 aircraft file, if it's all 15 aircraft in the first 15 minutes, then air traffic control does need some way to separate them sooner as, you know, compression or climb gradients vary. They want the aircraft out and safely on their en route flight plans. Like I said, this is just the worst case scenario. Likely it'll be closer to Gobs or if not over Gobs, but, you know, we just wanted to show roughly what it would be.
I appreciate that. Okay, Bonnie, would you put the warning areas back up again, if you don't mind?
Yes, it's doing some kind of saving. Oh, here we go.
It's always computers. Can you do a rough distance between the closest point of the northerly warning area and Gobs?
Oh, there it is. So from here to here, is that what you're looking at?
From the tip of the, yeah, right, just from there to Gobs, a distance. And I think you need to be about a mile away from the warning area, but we can subtract that.
Oh, that's true. It's,
But that's, we can do the math for a -1.
Looks to be about 24.
About 24.
Yeah,
And that
about
lower
24, so 23. Yeah.
23. And that lower section is used, I think, I can't see it, but it's only hot normally during business hours till 9 p.m. or something.
it's also the 6:30 till 9.
6:30 to 9. Okay. So if you're talking about 1 to 5, that's not much of a factor, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so if we can go back to just let me see some more of the top so we can fit. Perfect, thank you. So that being 23-ish miles from the warning area to Gobs, and the fact that the warning areas are only hot until 9 p.m. at night, 9 p.m. to 6:30, and you're only offering this from 1 to 5, it doesn't seem like the warning areas are a player in this. Is that correct at this point?
No, not specifically. There are times where they can be activated by NOTAMs outside of the scheduled time. Another thing that we also are cognizant of is the additional flying miles from the airlines. And I mean that in terms of not just fuel savings and everything, but the additional, honestly, emissions and air quality impacts that could have. And so accounting for that, this is the width of what we're submitting through the environmental review of, not having all of the aircraft go to Gobs and still accomplishing that additional 35 to 25 flying miles, depending on the airport, to reconnect with their originally filed flight plan. And so it is a balance.
I understand you're trying to provide something for the airlines, and it's a valid point. So you mentioned the environmental. So the environmental plan that you're sharing with, who are you sharing it with right now? Adam or whoever?
That mute button.
Yeah, I know.
The environmental plan. So the environmental plan is really what we've shared before. That's where we're at in the environmental review. We're going through the different analyses, whether it be fuel burn, air quality, emissions, noise screenings, et cetera. As of right now, we do not have any results to provide this group nor any public entity, nor have we had discussions on what specifically from the analyses we will provide or results from that. And that's where I say, we anticipate and we expect to work with the roundtables and perhaps specifically with this group to discuss the next steps on what to provide and how to message that environmental review or the results from the review.
So at this point, would you be in a position to even accept any counter proposals to your counter proposal from the roundtable?
So this is where we kind of go back to, we have the request from the select committee and the request from the roundtable, and this is what we can do to accomplish what the two entities have been asking for. A southbound route for aircraft departing San Francisco and Oakland that flew over the Golden Gate Bridge and over to the ocean and then south. This is what we can do at this particular point in time. If we want to do counter proposals, I would say that would fall outside of this proposal, and it would really reset the clock on all of the work that we've currently already done.
So if I understand you correctly, if the roundtable were for instance, to recommend or request that the aircraft not turn until the Dobbs intersection, you're saying that's a non-starter?
I didn't say that was a non. I should have.
I'm asking.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I should have clarified, Kathleen. I wouldn't say that's a non-starter right now. In terms of what we're analyzing, like I said, this is what we're analyzing right now and putting through the environmental review process. If there are anything specific that need to be changed, depending on the scope, I mean, if we're talking adding a published procedure from GOBS or changing the times of use or anything like that, I think that right there is something we'd have to really kind of go back to square one and start over with that. But if we're talking about, in my words, just minor adjustments to the proposal, I don't want to say we can or cannot accept it, but I think we should have that conversation, but it will involve more than just the FAA group that is here, because that is also placing restrictions on air traffic control. And I absolutely do not want to answer for the controllers that actually, control the aircraft.
I understand that. Okay.
And Kathleen, just to be clear, your concern with that turn and that early turn is that eventually they'd be flying over Pacifica, over some of our peninsula communities, versus staying over the ocean. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, yes. Oh, in the do I have it back? In the Bay Area, we have a number of published procedures, and as we all well know, the air traffic control system, more often than not, in many of the ones on the West Bay, use vectors instead of those procedures to move aircraft. And sometimes they take liberties that seem wider than necessary or out of the bounds of necessity. And I am concerned that if you start out by saying, okay, you can turn them at 7.6 nautical miles east or whatever we calculated that to be, that, some controller is going to start turning them at 8.6. And it's going to be affecting Pacifica, Daly City, the southwest and possibly even the northwest part of San Francisco. And there would be nothing wrong with that in air traffic control annals. But I think if you have a set point that you're aiming for, that you're more likely to perhaps adhere to it. But
so, and again, I think we've had this conversation many times about, we've asked many times why it is that we can't just put all the flights over the ocean versus over the peninsula. And I think that's back to that same question. Kathleen, do you have any other questions?
I do, but I can take them later, maybe after your members.
Go ahead. I have a few raised hands. I want to get to them, but I'd like to hear you out. So please go ahead.
So as I understand it, Adam or Bonnie, this would be this aspect of the departure prior to GOBS, or let's just say the southeast bound turn, will be part of the normal SOP, right? The NCT SOP?
So that is the difference between really the implementation of this versus a published procedure. It would be not just in the SOP, but this also would fall in a letter of agreement change between San Francisco Tower, Oakland Tower, and NorCal.
Mm-hmm. Which is the same with many of the procedures that are in the NCT SOP, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, do your controllers have? Let me ask you this: is this, let's call it a 7-mile east point that they might be turning them? Will that be displayed on their scopes as a point of some kind, a reference point?
So dynamically, controllers can place different markers on their scopes, but those are always temporary and those are subject to whatever controller wants to do. We cannot mandate that they put any sort of temporary marker on their control scope. If there's something that's permanently on the video map, those are very, very strict orders that we have to follow. And honestly, that takes another time and lengthy time to publish.
Okay.
I will say one thing that perhaps consider, and I'm throwing this out and at the behest of the roundtable, is the use of altitudes instead of a point. Specifically, Bonnie, if you can pull up the bodega
in there.
tracks, the bodega 3 and the bricks together.
Can we stay with this before we get into the altitudes, just to finish up?
Yes.
You,
Okay.
yeah.
No, that's fine.
So this do the controller scopes have stick or gobs on their scopes?
They'll have the waypoints, and yeah, they'll have the waypoints.
Okay, so they'd be able to see gobs, and they could know that if that was determined to be the turn point, it would be on their scopes.
Correct.
So that, okay. And I'm sorry, you wanted to talk about altitudes, which is great because that's the next one on my list.
So not specifically altitudes that aircraft will be at, but consideration of altitudes in lieu of an actual point over the ground. The big separation consideration for this procedure is where the night gobs transition crosses the bricks and the bodega center line as it goes to bricks waypoint. That really is the last confliction point before air traffic controllers. We assume that air traffic anticipate traffic controllers.
Bonnie, can you note that where that is on the map so that everybody can see it?
Yeah, I apologize.
Thank you.
And
sorry, Adam.
No, please. That was a great point. So this is why we picked that area as really the extreme. And that turn point was really if there were no conflictions on the bodega or bricks. Likely if there were, they would not be turned until they were past that because they'll just, conflict with them further down the line. One thing to consider is the use of altitude instead of an actual turn point. Depending on what altitude the aircraft would be at, turn south on course when they're at or above 12 or 13,000 feet. By the time they get to the shoreline on a standard climb rate, they're still going to be climbing 15 or 17,000 feet above the ground.
Okay, which brings up another point, and that is the use of speed as a portion of this. As you well know, when the aircraft are reaching 10,000 feet, they're typically going to accelerate to their cruising altitude, which will delay their climb, their continued immediate climb to some degree or another. What if you were to have the 250 knots all the way to gobs and until reaching a certain altitude? Is that something you've considered?
Speed control in terms of separation and establishing altitude restrictions or anything like that. And Bonnie has much more air traffic control experience than I do, but in my, I'll say, limited experience, speed control is really the last of the main three tools that air traffic controllers use to separate aircraft. The first two being vectoring and altitude.
I wasn't considering it as a separation tool, but as a tool to get your airplanes back on course by attaining an altitude without going farther than they want to go.
Right, separation tool. I mean separation, not necessarily aircraft to aircraft or aircraft from destruction, but just establishing them on a course or establishing them on a particular point in space. It's the least of the three as far as being predictable of where the aircraft will be in altitude or lateral position.
Okay, because I think altitude is the real key. If we can reach a high enough altitude, then where you turn becomes not so important. But if you're going to have normal speed all the way through the climb, including a acceleration to high speed at 10,000 feet, I think we're going to have a hard time attaining a quiet enough altitude to justify turning over land. I mean, maybe you have some numbers on altitudes because I don't. Our expectations on altitudes, I should say.
Expectations when they cross back over land?
Well, what would be the expectation crossing well, you can pick any point, crossing gobs. If we just did that, what would they be at gobs? What would they be if you wanted to turn them at the bodega arrival crossing point?
Yeah, and you bring up a very good point, and just in the area of transparency, this is why we not purposely did not show altitudes, but it's why we wanted to discuss this specifically. We recognize that this proposal would add significant number of flying miles to the departure paths of airplanes. specifically on their departure routes. And so as a pilot, I mean, you understand that different carriers have different climb profiles depending on the aircraft, depending on how the aircraft are loaded, et cetera. We're not sure, honestly, how this may affect aircraft and carriers changing their climb profile, if they may account for that, the additional flying miles to make up for, or account for the change in the climb profile. At the minimum climb gradient that we have seen on the stick and candle, like Bonnie was saying, crossing the Golden Gate Bridge is anywhere between 10 and 15,000 feet on the extremes. As we get further along with the proposed flight paths, either up near Daly City as it's shown here, or down towards Foyle on the edge, that range increases because the climb gradients are so variable. As you cross over to Daly City, we anticipate or expect that would be on a minimum 13,000 feet, upwards of 16 or 17, depending on the aircraft, the carrier climb profile, et cetera.
And what, I'm always kind of curious, if the FAA has some thought in mind at what altitude they think is sort of acceptable over residential areas. And that would depend very much on whether they're basically at idle power gliding on the bodega, or if they're climbing up on a departure at, you know, full climb power. 12 or 13,000 feet at nighttime or anytime in a climbing airplane, underneath a climbing airplane, is not necessarily quiet. Whereas it might be acceptable on a glide, it's quite different on a climb with climb power, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we haven't defined that altitude of what, you know, aircraft will say should be above the ground, because there's so many different factors, and whether or not, honestly, they're the only aircraft in the sky. I mean, that's also a factor to consider too. You know, I don't have an answer for that question.
I just wonder if we should explore more on the speed restrictions on this. And I know that you guys probably don't like speed restrictions for typical operations, but in this case, this is a procedure that would, it doesn't help the airlines get to where they're going. It's out of their way. We understand that. It's a real, you know, ask for them to be doing that. But one thing as a pilot that you probably know is that pilots do not like to speed up and go fast going the wrong direction. We would rather turn that energy into climb and turn it into altitude. And since we're going basically the wrong direction from takeoff up to night and out to gobs, I don't think anybody would mind flying at a slower airspeed for those legs in order to reach an altitude that would get them on course faster. Does that make sense?
It does. No, absolutely. I absolutely see your point. And the reason why I was, you know, soliciting altitude as consideration from the roundtable, to be honest, is to that exact point. We can have a predictable point in space. One thing in our outreach, which we'll also include engagement and outreach with the carriers, because this does significantly affect them.
Absolutely.
And so if we brief our results, and as we go through this, we will brief the results and give them, you know, what to expect on this procedure. And I'm not saying this is the solution or, you know, downplaying the speed restriction, but kind of to your point, if we say, you know, the expectation or the request from the communities is for you not to turn on course until you're above 13 or 15 or whatever altitude is deemed acceptable, they'll likely meet that, and they'll do what they need to do to meet that. We're trying to stay outside of the cockpit as much as possible. And if they need to reduce speed, as you said, which is how they climb faster, they'll do that. Because like you said, they want to get on course sooner than go even further out of their way.
But I think that would be having a mandate of that into the procedure, if there was a way, would be something to consider. Anyway, we get that. Let me just see if I have any other quick questions, because I'm taking up way too much time here.
Kathleen, maybe we can come back to you.
Absolutely.
Again.
Yeah,
Okay, so
please do.
I know that our vice chair had a comment or question. I'm going to go with Ann Wenger. Are you available, Ann?
Yep, I am, and I'm unmuted. And thank you for Kathleen, particularly for your questions, and Ricardo, you had a few of mine answered. One of the questions that I did have, though, that we haven't talked about is the number of these flights that are actually coming out of the Oakland side, since we're developing a single stream. I know Ricardo asked the numbers relative to SFO, but I want to make sure that we all understand what's happening also as a result of where they're ultimately merging, coming in from the Oakland side and then moving on up to Knight and Gobbs. So that would be my first question for you, Adam.
So it is roughly, in the times that we've seen, a 70-30 split between the numbers of aircraft that be coming from San Francisco versus Oakland. That varies during the day. Oakland does have a larger cargo time period during the middle, I believe between the 2 and 3:30 hours normally. To answer your question specifically where they would come from Oakland, they would fly on the Hush departure procedure, and they would meet at Hush Waypoint, which is also on the Knight. And then from there, that is really the impetus to our 30 per hour. I don't want to call it a limit, but capacity, I guess, on that center line.
And I guess, in following up on that, knowing that it's likely that the growth will occur in that Oakland cargo portion of the overnight flights, since obviously they're bringing in with the number of cargo impact, I think, of currently, not only COVID, but just overall in terms of the growth of cargo and overnight flights of cargo into our region. And clearly Oakland is taking a big part of that. I have some concern about what this looks like going forward if we're limited on the total number. And obviously what we're trying to do for everyone is to keep flights over the water as long as possible. And if we have to start coming back on the number of flights at San Francisco that might be able to benefit by this routing, even in that only relatively short time period of 1 to 5, I would expect that there will be some further growth in Oakland that could impact San Francisco's ability to have those routes flown.
So one thing that we've always said through this is the potential implementation of this proposal does not eliminate the use of from San Francisco the 050 departure, nor from Oakland the 120 departure down the bay. If needed and if possible, those two will still be available to San Francisco and Oakland Tower. One thing that I think you bring up a good point, which is important to note, is one thing that air traffic does not want to do, and I mean, we can all agree to this, is we don't want to go into a configuration, then out, then into, then out throughout the night. Once we go into this, I mean, for safety, we need to stay in this configuration as long as possible without going back and forth to, using the stick for departures, using the night for them, and then mismatching the aircraft on the other side. At 30 per hour does not necessarily take away aircraft from each of the airports. At 30 per hour is when delays would start to occur on the ground to establish the spacing needed, because that center line just exceeds capacity.
Okay. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And I'm going back to Kathleen, if you're ready for me.
Chair Ortiz, this is Vice Mayor Schneider. I've had my hand up for about 40 minutes.
I know. I'm getting to you. I'm aware that your hand is up, so give me just a second. Kathleen, did you have any follow-ups?
I'll wait until all the members have had their turn.
Perfect.
And
thank you. Okay.
Later on.
Vice Mayor Schneider, please.
Thank you. And for the FAA people, I'm from the city of Millbrae. The slide that you had that showed the environmental criteria that you're using, would you be able to pull that back? And my questions are, I don't know what is considered a 106 consultation. And further, I'll go on. Do you or are you also considering the particulate pollution? I see the CO2 emissions, but are you looking at particulates, and specifically, are you now looking at ultrafine particulates?
So I'll answer the first one. That's the easier one. Section 106 consultation really is a specific requirement to work with the state historic preservation offices as well as the tribal historic preservation offices to help us identify any historically significant building structures or properties that would be affected by this change. It falls within our NEPA criteria, but is a separate law that we do have to follow. And so Section 106 consultation really deals with historic properties, whether it be state-owned, county-owned, or tribal. In terms of the air quality, fuel burn, noise screening, CO2 emissions, we're following our orders as they're written currently. And I know there's a lot of talk about ultrafine particles. I'm not an environmental protection specialist, and so I don't want to speak on the specific criteria of what we're looking at. I will say, like I said, the scope of this change is we're doing a lot more than I have seen before, just given the scope of the change, and it's just an increase in utilization of an existing procedure. And so there is a lot more analysis specifically in the air quality inventory. As to the specifics of what is analyzed in the air quality inventory, I'm not sure of that, and I wish that I had a better answer, but I definitely don't want to make one up.
Okay, and under the new, I guess, NEPA guidelines that FAA follows, are you also looking at environmental justice communities?
Absolutely.
Okay, and how, and this does not have to be answered right now, how exactly does the FAA define environmental justice communities? And again, if you don't have it now, if someone could send that to me, to us, I'd like to bring it up at the Ground-Based Noise Committee.
So I'll take you up on that offer of not answering that right now. I will say our main order that we follow is the FAA order 1050.1F, and F is the current version. I believe that is available online. I'm
sorry, I'm writing that down, 1050.F?
1050.1.
Okay. A couple of other questions then. I am assuming, because we're talking between 1 and 5 a.m., and yes, indeed, very often, even when the weather doesn't seem bad, the 11 p.m. and 12 a.m. departures push into 1 o'clock. And I can tell you that I hear them going basically every 2 minutes in the 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, sometimes to 2:30 hour. But none of the work here would open up or switch takeoffs from 28 to 1? Or is
No, this change or this proposal does not affect runway use planning or runway use plans in any way.
okay. One of the things that has happened because of COVID and how much less noise from multiple sources, it is easier right now to figure out what might be coming from a 28 departure and a 1 departure, and a theory that we've talked about at Ground-Based Noise, that the 1s and the 28s departures might be combining their noise on that. Now, this may not be something that the Night Hush is considering, but that we'll bring up at Ground-Based Noise. So I am not as opposed to 21 departures. I think we're getting more noise by 28 departures, but that'll have to be tested.
And,
so,
that's, I think that makes more sense in the ground-based.
well, I understand, but my concern is, great, between Oakland and San Francisco, they decide that Night Hush or Hush Night will work, and that is going to switch things from 28 to 1. And right now, 1s have not been good. Well, right now, life is good, but I don't want to see the switching unless we have proof that it's not going to create more ground-based noise, and I don't have any proof of that. Sorry, somehow I just lost the screen.
Okay, but
I have a couple of others, and then I'm done, Chair.
Okay.
You talked about some months where the 30 happens between 12 midnight and 12:15. That's completely true. I would just like the Roundtable to notice that we need to be paying attention to what happens between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. because the 12 o'clock hour is pre-COVID hell. And then, and you explained the cap, the 20 hours, 106 ultrafine. Okay, that's what I've got for now.
Okay, thank you very much. And,
actually, I do have one more. I'm sorry. When the FAA looks at the flight patterns, I know you're talking about in-flight noise, but we have talked about 2 different ways a jet can take off, and it's sort of running down the runway slowly and a more level takeoff versus going down quickly and doing an abrupt takeoff. Does this Hush Night Does that make any difference? If it's a
No.
steep climb from takeoff or a gradual climb?
Whether it's a steep, the initial takeoff of the aircraft is determined by the pilot. However, they determine is a safe way to get their aircraft off the ground and established on this procedure. It is up to the pilot. Once they're established on this procedure, then they're required to fly the procedure as published and fly it within the parameters of published restrictions, whether it be speed, lateral, or altitude guidance.
Okay, so since Justin is on the call, Justin, can we add that to our list of the criteria to look at ground-based noise?
Sure, I will note it for discussion tomorrow. Yep.
Mr. Chair, this is Linda. I just had a quick follow-up to
Yes.
Mayor Schneider's question for Adam. Just two clarifications. So one, what Vice Mayor Schneider was asking about the criteria in the environmental review. Is it possible, I know you don't have the answers now, but to provide more information about those criteria prior to you providing us with the results, or you'll give it to us all at the same time? Just for understanding what's in there.
In terms of, honestly, priorities and workload and us trying to get through everything we are right now, I can't promise that we will be able to provide that prior to the results. That will be, part of the results that we go through and how we got to the analysis. If the
That's fine. I just wanted to understand kind of how that worked.
No, if the technical work group or the roundtable would like a specific briefing on the criteria and exactly what we're asking for, the particulates and stuff, that we can just, you guys please feel free to ask us in normal correspondence, and outside of 30 days we'll try and do that.
Okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And then one other question, maybe that was embedded in Vice Mayor Schneider's question, but regarding flights that are scheduled for departure in that midnight hour, if they were to be delayed for other reasons, and end up in the 1 o'clock hour, 1 a.m. hour, how would they be addressed in terms of use of this procedure?
So in terms of the time right now that we're proposing is 1 to 5 a.m. If there are any delays that need to occur, if weather in the middle of the bay, whether it be over the Golden Gate Bridge, anything like that, then we'll need to be able to adjust that dynamically to safely run aircraft in the Bay Area. In terms of starting this at 1 and having aircraft delayed into that 1 o'clock hour,
That's the question.
the scheduled time of departure that determines whether or not the aircraft will fly this procedure. It's their actual departure their departure time.
Oh, that's great.
As long as air traffic control can accommodate that aircraft in the flight plan and on that center line between mid-bay and night from San Francisco, I just assume we're talking about San Francisco, they will do so. If needed, there'll be a ground-based delay, or if absolutely necessary, there might be that 050 departure like I was talking about, depending on the route of flight and everything else.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. That was not my understanding. That's actually good to hear. Anybody have other questions? I do have one question. I just want to go, you guys walk me through something real quick. So comparing the two procedures, if you have a flight leaving using the stick, by the time it turns and it gets to port, what altitude would that airplane be at?
I don't have that right in front of me right now, so I don't want to give a false altitude with that.
Okay, and I'm just trying to compare it to the night procedure that I'm guessing just from looking at the distance that the one that's turning on gobs or 7.5 miles short of gobs would be a lot higher than the one that turned on stick.
Oh, without question, yes. Yeah.
So by the time they reach port.
Yes, if the aircraft flew the night procedure to gobs and then overflew port, absolutely, they would be on a much higher altitude than if they just departed via the stick.
And the reason I bring that up is looking at our neighbors down south, they will be benefiting from this change in procedure because the flights, the same amount of flights are flying over at a much higher altitude. Is that correct?
Yes, and one thing to consider is that the stick departure procedure does have a restriction at or below 10,000 feet at port. And so aircraft that apply that procedure, they fly the procedure as published, which we're required to do unless other reasons we need to take them off the procedure. They're required to cross port at or below 10,000 feet.
Perfect, thank you. Anybody else have any other? I do have one other comment, but I will defer to anybody else in case that's the same one you have. Anybody else? Linda, Angela, do we have any raised hands?
We don't have any raised hands from members. We do have raised hands from the public. Okay,
so members, let me just make one quick point as far as the issue with noise shifting. And I'm talking, and so I keep bringing this up, that when we're flying 1,500 feet above a heavily populated area versus flying 7,000 to somewhere between 7,000 to 10,000 over water that's not exactly over the populated areas, I find it hard to say that is noise shifting because it's not apples to apples. But having said that, I will move on. We'll open it to public comment. And Angela, I will let you take the control from here.
Thank you, Chair. As a reminder, if you wish to speak on item 3, please raise your hand through the Zoom feature. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. And Chair, I do see 4 hands raised. I'm first going to call on Jordan to unmute your microphone. You will have 2 minutes.
And Angela, just for clarification, you are timing them, correct?
Yes, I will
Thank you.
share my timer in a second.
Okay.
This is Bonnie. Do you need me to stop sharing?
Hi, this is Darlene Yapley using Jordan's Zoom account. My comments are on the magenta slide, if we can bring that up. As you can see, this is a very large area and includes cities in San Francisco Roundtable and outside of the San Francisco Roundtable. I think what we're looking for is 2 things: the predictability of expectations. So will there be default headings after GOBS, and what are they? You mentioned the 4 waypoints, but it's likely there's supposed to be more specifics. And the most important thing is the expectations of noise. There's been comments about worse and likely. Just so everyone knows, the FAA predicted Pirate would have no increase, and the actual increase in quantity was 26%. So we have to be aware of what the range could be. The noise impacts are altitude, speed, likely vectoring, and quantity of planes. So I asked that the FAA, when they do their noise modeling for the environmental review, when they run the AEDT tool, if they could also do the and above option showing noise above and below the 65 DNL. Also, if you could specify what cities are impacted. It's very hard to just look at the map. So when specifics are available on the running of these noise modeling, and if you're not doing that, if we could ask that you do it. Another important question is about if Night Hush is going to cross over or under Bodega. This could have a large impact. And lastly, the FAA put on their slide noise shifting. It would be useful to understand what areas the FAA saw.
Thank you. Would you like to comment on that? Some of the FAA members, if there's something you'd like to respond to that before we move on to the next comment?
The only thing that I would like to comment. Hi, Darlene. Sorry we can't see each other in person again, but the magenta area is something that is really a kind of a debate or a tool that we're trying to work out. And I appreciate any feedback regarding that. One thing that we do not want to do is really put lines on paper from GOBS to those 5 waypoints, because that does raise the expectation that those are set lines that aircraft will fly. And just like you're talking about, we want to make sure that the predictability and where aircraft are going to fly is what we're honestly showing. And so to kind of counteract that we developed the magenta area just to show the extreme. And that's not to say that aircraft will fly continuously over all of those populations, or that there will be a wide dispersion and this change will affect all of those areas. we wanted to account even for those 1s and 2s of aircraft that go outside of, you know, what we expect from GOBS to Libo, Suzy, KX, and Intel. And so, yeah, I just wanted to at least address that point.
Great, thank you, Adam. Okay, Angela, we'll move on to our next comment.
Thank you. I will now call on Jean Bernald, followed by Jennifer L. Jean, please accept this request to unmute your microphone and you may begin speaking.
Thank you, Angela. This is Mary Lynn Bernald. I forgot to change the settings on the computer. I'm the chair of the SCSC Roundtable, and I want to thank both Kathleen Wentworth and Ricardo Ortiz for starting the questions or indicating concern about People South. My question goes to Adam or Bonnie. Welcome on board, Bonnie. I'm looking more at Katina and Suzy, the numbers of flights and the altitude when they are over the North Monterey Bay and South Santa Cruz County area. I'm wondering what the numbers are, if they will have attained altitude by that time, and if there is any climbing still continuing or not on that part. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
I don't have much to share. Unfortunately, this is kind of what I was talking about with Kathleen of, you know, we're not sure, and this will involve our additional outreach and engagement with the carriers and stakeholders. I don't anticipate there to be a major change in the climb profiles or how aircraft will fly the night. And they do have to fly it as it's published and in compliance with any air traffic controls that are given. But at the same time, they will likely account in some way or another for their additional flying miles. I will say those 5 waypoints are quite far away from San Francisco in terms of the flying time. And so depending on the altitude that they're flying at or climbing to, they may be at altitude as they cross those waypoints. One thing that I do want to mention is that this proposal will not change, likely not change the percentage of aircraft going over those 5 waypoints. And so we use the numbers based on where they flew from the stick or candle and applied those to the same aircraft as they were to fly the night or hush over GOBS.
Right, so what happens south of Port doesn't change dramatically between what's there today and what's being proposed.
I don't want to say that it won't change dramatically. The flights that go over the night GOBS transition will connect to their previous route of flight as it was previously defined, as if they were flying the stick departure. So regardless of whether they're on the stick or the night, they'll fly to that waypoint that they want to fly to, you know, based on their destination, whether it be Libo, Suzy, KX, or Intel.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate that, Adam. So go ahead, Angela. We'll go with our next comment.
Thank you, Chair. And we did get 2 additional comments. So Jennifer, I'm going to unmute your microphone and you can begin speaking. If you can please state your city.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Landesman from Palo Alto. I want to thank you and celebrate environmental review, because as Adam mentioned, this is more than has ever been done. It's actually completely new, and it will be completely new to us to have noise screening and environmental assessments where the community's involved. I thank you because it's really the only way that people on the ground have a role as stakeholders. It's new, it's more, but it's still based on old rules and criteria that have not served well in understanding concerns on the ground. So I really think, for example, N65 to me as a metric seems really loud for the communities in the Mid-Peninsula. I would say N60 and above 60 is better. But I think a lot of investment has to go into seeing the assumptions and the different metrics that are going to be used. I'm also worried about how community requests are being sort of taken from one form and then turned into another. You know, it starts out one way and then it ends up another. So to me, community requests end up being like any airline request. It's not necessarily a mitigation plan that considers the whole region. So I'm very concerned about that. And lastly, just to add to the point about metrics and how an environmental review would be best done, the select committee unanimously voted for having supplemental metrics and also for pre and post noise screening. And I always believe that we should have a chance to really be able to go back and discuss mitigation plans when all of these projects are done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And one more, Angela?
We actually have 3 more.
Okay.
Mary Jo, please accept this request to unmute your microphone and begin speaking.
So my name is Mary Jo Fremont. I'm from Palo Alto. I have a few questions. First, I would like for the FAA to answer the question that was asked before. Will the night hush procedure fly under bodega arrivals or over bodega arrivals? They cross at some point. That should be an easy answer to give. The other question is, I'm quite concerned about the Oakland departures. And I wonder whether the Oakland departures at night are going to have to take the night hush, because the ATC just created the SUNY procedure, which is a departure south over the bay, which is a really nice shortcut if you want to go to kayaks or Entel. So the noise in that case is impacting peninsula cities such as Menlo Park, Palo Alto, etc., because these flights are really low and they're very noisy. Remember, these are cargo planes. So I would really like to understand the interdependency between SUNY, which is a procedure that nobody asked for, but was implemented by the FAA recently. So the interaction between SUNY and the night hush departure from Oakland. And a third question is, I'm glad to hear that the FAA is starting to look at coordinating the operations between SFO and Oakland. And my question there would be, is that also going to be true for arrivals? Because in the peninsula, many of our arrivals during the night hours create noise for people who are trying to sleep because there is no coordination. And it seems that Oakland always get their cut in terms of departures. And for instance, Bodega West arrivals go over the peninsula instead of Bodega East. And finally, in terms of a resident, 1 to 5 a.m. is not a night for me. 4 hours is not enough. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're trying to keep our topic, the night hush. That was the posted agenda item on here. So, and that is what the FAA is prepared to answer. So we're going to restrict the, well, hopefully if you could keep your comments to this procedure, that would be better. So go ahead, Angela, with the next one.
Thank you, Chair. Jennifer T., please accept this request to unmute your microphone, and please do tell us your city.
Sorry about that. Took me a second to unmute. My city is Sunnyvale, and a couple things I wanted to comment on. On the night 3 procedure, I'm a little confused when using the 01 runway. There's a waypoint called MD Bay, which kind of implies that the flights might be going down the bay, and it's not being shown on any of the PowerPoint presentations. So I'm kind of wondering about that. Again, it's something that would potentially look like it could come down the bay, and that has concern for places like Sunnyvale on some sort of departure there. As far as gobs, I'm looking at slide 7 with the magenta and what Kathleen was mentioning and the FAA, where the flights might be breaking off of gobs 7 miles early. And my concern there is, if you look at slide 7, that could potentially, as those flights fly toward those waypoints, Entel, KX, Sussy, and Libo, that those might shift routes over toward the peninsula and the South Bay, whereas previously those were more over the mountains and the ocean. And while I understand that the altitudes will be higher, a shifting of those flight routes toward us, toward the peninsula and South Bay, is of concern. Because at night, even at high altitudes, you can hear the flights. For example, on Stick, that route between YouTube and Entel is pretty distinct at night, even at about 9,000 feet. So you can definitely hear those planes. You can hear them well. And I would doubt even at 20 or 30,000 feet, you're not going to hear them with your windows open. So again, something to be cognizant of. There could be a shifting here. Thank you.
Okay, you know what? We are running out of time. We have 4 more minutes to go. And we do need to end at 1 o'clock. So we have one more comment, Angela?
Yes, Chair. We have one more comment from Sue. Please allow this, please accept this request to unmute your microphone and state your city.
Thank you. Sue Degree from Pacifica. I'm not sure if I'm on or not, but anyway. Can you hear me?
You are, Sue.
Okay, thank you very much. So really appreciate all this, working to keep things high and over the ocean. A couple things. I'd like a little bit more information when you talk about doing more study of noise. Remember, it's a health issue, and it seems like one of the focuses is to make sure there's no delays on the ground. So I'm a little concerned about what you mean by scoping noise. And the other one is, who do you contact regarding the historical areas within a community? Thanks very much. Appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, Sue. Great to hear you.
And Chair, sorry, we did get one last hand raised by Lydia. Lydia, please accept this request to unmute your microphone and state your city.
Lydia Cruz, City of Palo Alto. Thank you for taking my question. I'd like to ask if Night Hush will fly above or below Bodega. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam, do you guys have an answer for that one that keep coming up? Hopefully we use our last few minutes to answer that question.
Yeah, there's 2 parts, if you don't mind, and I'll be as brief as I can. The first one regarding the bodega and night hush interaction. Looking at the times of use between 1 and 5 a.m., there are not a lot of bodega aircraft that we've seen that are at the same time as aircraft that would fly on the night or hush. I don't want to say they will be at the same altitude, they will be at similar altitudes. And so it will be on a case-by-case basis. If air traffic control can have the night or hush aircraft go above, and that's the most expeditious way for them to climb out of the Bay Area, then that's what they'll do. If they need to vector, likely that would be the last case scenario, but they do retain that ability to do so. So we'll be on a case-by-case basis. The one thing regarding the Sunny departure procedure, as well as the 050 and 120, one thing, and what I was saying by going back and forth in and out of configurations, air traffic control is required to have aircraft on a miles and trail spacing for each of the 5 waypoints. And so in order to do that, the aircraft have to be on the same route. And so aircraft on the night cannot be effectively sequenced with aircraft on the Sunny that are going to the same waypoint. And so once this configuration is established, unless there was an extreme different situation, they will be flying on the night or hush departure procedure, depending on the airport.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, we're really out of time here, but we have a change that I think is going to benefit a number of people in the city of San Francisco and in some of the neighboring communities where these flights are still flying through. When it comes to everything south of Port, my sense is due to the higher altitudes, we will still be better off, but I think we still have some questions, and I appreciate everybody bringing up those questions. I think this is very exciting. I think this is great to have the change, and hopefully this sets the standard for what we do next. So I appreciate, Adam, all your information. You've been wonderful. I appreciate all the graphics that you came with, and everybody for all your questions. Thank you so much. This has been a really, really good meeting, and I look forward to our next one. Everybody, we'll see you soon. Thank you. Adjourned. Linda, did you have something? You look like
Yeah, I was just gonna, a quick announcement just to remind everyone, tomorrow we do have a ground-based noise subcommittee meeting at 3 p.m. And next week we have our regular full roundtable meeting at the regular time, and all that information is available on the website.
Right. Once again, thank you for all your information, and thank you all for participating, and we'll see you tomorrow and next week. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.